Welcome to Opposition Territory here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest-running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. It is great to see you if you are on YouTube watching us right now. If we are in your ears, we appreciate you subscribing and listening on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on this week. We got a great Opposition Territory podcast. We're going to be diving into the Atlanta Falcons, what their offseason has looked like. It's a very interesting team heading into this NFL season. And with us from the Locked On Falcons podcast, we've had him on before. Love talking to him. We've got Aaron Freeman. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, Jeff. Love to be talking ball with you, especially for these Eagles coming off a great year.
Yes.
Riding high. It seems like every 7 years the Eagles are riding high, coming off a win. So
Exactly.
we'll get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. I hope it's not going to be like that long, like 7 years. Like I know I'm talking
Well, look,
to somebody who's
yeah. For me, I will take
Falcons
that.
fan. Yes, exactly. I shouldn't be complaining about anything, and I'm not complaining about anything by any stretch of the imagination. But Aaron, I wanted to really dive into what the vision has been for this Falcons organization during this off season, because it has been, at least as somebody who loves ball, loves talking about various teams in the NFL, they've had an interesting offseason, a lot of concentration on the defense, which we're going to get into in a little bit more detail in a bit. But I wanted to first dive into, again, that vision for what this Falcons front office has been doing and even how it's been perceived by the fan base. So I'm wondering, can you talk about that vision just based on where things are at during this offseason for this Falcons team and organization?
Well, I think you touched on it, Jeff, where the expectation going into this offseason was that the Falcons were going to make major investments on the defensive side of the ball because of the many investments that they've made over the last 4 years under general manager Terry Fontenot on the offensive side of the ball. You've seen that with their first round picks, selecting 4 straight years of offensive skill position players. And the expectation was like this was going to be the year where they would finally go defense in round one, to the point that, immediately after the season, sort of the running gag on Locked On Falcons was that we know that the Falcons are definitely taking a first round pass rusher because
Right.
they have to. There's no reason that we can take this organization seriously if they pass on that, given the struggles of their pass rush over not just the last 4 years, but the last 20 years with this football team. And so I think, the expectation going into this offseason that they would be aggressive trying to upgrade the defense. And it's kind of this sort of dichotomy where at the outset of the offseason in free agency, they were not as aggressive as I expected. And I think many other Falcon fans expected them to be.
Okay.
They did sign some players, but none of them I think you would point to and say that's a needle mover. That guy's going to change the landscape of this defense. It's just like they're more just kind of treading water type of free agent signings for this team. And then they contrast that with a much more aggressive approach in the draft, taking not only one pass rusher in the first round and Jalen Walker out of Georgia, but then trading back into the first round to get James Pierce out of Tennessee. They went and got two more defensive pieces in the secondary in the draft. And so I think a lot of people came out of the draft loving the Falcons' aggressive approach to improving the defense with the draft. But you kind of have that dichotomy of like, typically with draft picks, it takes some time for those guys to develop an impact on the football field, as opposed to free agents, where if you want that immediate return. And so you wonder a little bit about the balance of, if you want to see significant improvement for this Falcons defense this upcoming season, maybe you flip that and go, we're going to be aggressive in free agency and, still try to make the moves in the draft, but maybe let things come to us a little bit differently in that. And so I think that's where you sort of some of the confusion, maybe not the right word, but sort of not necessarily seeing the vision of what this organization is doing is like, are they feeling that sense of urgency to get this defense up to another level because of how they approach the offseason? And like, you can, again, the draft tells you that they do see it, but you do wonder a little bit where you didn't see that aggressive approach throughout the entire offseason.
Absolutely. Great points. I think that after I took a look at what the Falcons draft was, it basically told, I think, NFL fans, who really follow teams, that this Falcons team, yes, we want to turn that corner, and we want to turn it sooner rather than later. But we have to get younger. We got to get younger from a defensive perspective, and that's what I think the beginning of their draft really was. I think you really hit on it, Aaron. And it goes, if we do a 180, we were kind of talking about the defensive standpoint and foundational structures that the front office is looking to put into place here for the future. We have to talk about the future of the offense. We got to talk about Michael Penix Jr. I cannot wait to see what he is going to be able to do on the field this year. I mean, during his 3 starts this past season, team averaged 32 points per game. I mean, that's pretty incredible. It's pretty interesting. So for all you fantasy folks out there, keep that in mind as you're going to be going into your drafts this summer. While he's certainly not perfect by any stretch, he's going to learn a lot. He's going to develop. This first full season as an NFL quarterback here, Aaron, I'm wondering what the logical floor and ceiling is for Michael Penix Jr. I'm sure you've given it some thought. I know you've talked about it as well on the Locked On Falcons podcast. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think you're. It's going to be interesting. This is the challenge of young quarterbacks where you're just like we don't know exactly what we're. It's probably similar to I think how Eagles fans thought of Jalen Hurts going into his second season.
Yeah.
Coming off those 4 starts where you're like, yeah, there's some positive things that he did in those 4 starts that give us some optimism, but it's not enough of a sample size to really nail down like he's definitely going to be the guy. And that's kind of the thing with Michael Penix, where you saw some of the flashes that you get excited about if you're a Falcon fan, and sort of you're looking at him being that potential top 15 to upper half of the league type of quarterback that can lead a team like Jalen Hurts did in his second season to the postseason, even though he's not necessarily the fully formed version of the player that he's come into being. And then you sort of wonder, are you going to get that sort of typical roller coaster that you get with young quarterbacks that, again, the Eagles fans are familiar with the early career of Jalen Hurts. And I think you feel when you look at the floor of Michael Penix, I think you feel a lot better than you felt as a Falcon fan in 2 years ago when the Falcons were making that bet on Desmond Ridder, where you don't expect Michael Penix to come in and basically be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL this season. You feel like that floor is higher than that based off of what you saw in these first 3 games. But at the same time, could he be only the 25th best quarterback in the NFL this upcoming season? That's a real possibility if you get those sort of rookie, first year starter sort of ups and downs. And is that going to be good enough for this team to achieve their goals of making the postseason? Probably not. But at the same time, I think when I look at sort of my vision of where it goes with Michael Penix, I'm expecting kind of those ups and downs early in the season as he's working through those things and some of the challenges with the Falcons' upcoming schedule in 2025. But the hope is that there's a point at the end of the season where he kind of turns a corner. And the 2 players I would compare it to is Jordan Love with the Green Bay Packers and Baker Mayfield with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where you look at Jordan Love that first season as a starter back in 2023, where it was very up and down for like the first 10 or so games of that season, but then something clicked for him. He played outstanding down the stretch, and that guided the Packers to the playoffs. And then you look at Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, they've won the NFC South the last 2 seasons, primarily because Baker Mayfield has played really well in the month of December. And so you kind of deal with Baker Mayfield issues for 2-3 months of the season, and then by the end of the season he's playing his best football and has been one of the best late season quarterbacks the last couple of years combined. And that's kind of what I'm expecting and hoping from Michael Penix. It's like you're going to deal with some ups and down play over the first 2-3 months of the season, but hopefully by those last 4 to 6 games of the season he's figured it out and you're starting to see the franchise quarterback emerge. And so one of the things I say constantly on Locked On Falcons is not how you start, it's how you finish. And I think Michael Penix has shown enough that you feel like there's the potential for him to finish strong. And that's going to be the thing that the Falcons can say, okay, this is our guy. We found our Matt Ryan replacement that we have been desperately searching for the last couple of years. And I think, Penix has shown enough that you feel optimistic about that. It's just ultimately at the end of the day, you got to see it on the field.
High floor, high ceiling. I mean, that's what I'm feeling when it comes to Michael Penix Jr. and what we may see from him this coming season here. Again, folks, talking to Aaron Freeman from the Locked On Falcons podcast. Aaron, can you tell everybody where they can find you on social if they want to follow you, if they want to, listen to what you guys are doing over at Locked On Falcons?
Yeah, you can find Locked On Falcons, anywhere you find podcasts on YouTube and other audio platforms. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Locked On Falcons. You can find me on Blue Sky at FalcFans. That was my old Twitter account, but unfortunately, it got locked because of things on Twitter. So I have to split my time on the
crazy world out there, my friend. Yeah. I know. I can't believe I haven't been locked yet. It'll get there. In fact, my co-host, he got locked this past week. He got locked up. Of course. Anyway, as we're moving along with the conversation here, there is a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about what the Falcons should do with tight end Kyle Pitts to keep him or trade him. And I can't believe I'm actually having this conversation with you right now, Aaron, because I know on the Locked On Falcons podcast, the message really has been, okay, you keep Kyle Pitts. Do not trade him. I am in that camp. I have no idea why, when you have Michael Penix Jr. coming in, a prolific arm, someone who has vision on the field, and you have a talent like Kyle Pitts, why you would really want to get rid of him. I want to get your thoughts on this, why it would be a mistake for the front office to deal Pitts to another team. I think it's kind of crazy. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think the case for trading Kyle Pitts is an understandable case because he's going into a contract year. And it doesn't seem, based off of the last couple of years of disappointing play from Kyle Pitts, that the Falcons are likely going to be looking to extend him beyond this year. And so the case for trading Kyle Pitts is you got to get, you're going to lose him for nothing next year. And so try to get something for him today.
Yeah.
But those offers, the recent reports about, the Falcons being open to trading Kyle Pitts, if covering the Falcons, like, this is not new. This is not a new development. There was talks last year's trade deadline that,
right,
the Falcons are open to trading Kyle Pitts. And so the fact that he hasn't been traded is kind of telling you that teams are not making the types of offers that would make the Falcons go, hey, maybe this is worthwhile for us to try to maximize him. But to your point, I do tend to think that if the goal of the Falcons is to break their 7-year playoff drought, which is tied for the second longest in the NFL actively, you need a talent like Kyle Pitts, where when you look at the way I would explain it is there's a big three on the Falcons in terms of the skill positions. It's Bijan Robinson, it's Drake London, Darnell Mooney, in that order. Those are the three guys that had outstanding seasons in 2024, and you're hoping to build off of that in 2025.
Yeah.
But you kind of need a fourth guy in the event that you're going to face some games where, some of those guys are going to be limited. You're going to face some good defenses. Maybe there are games where there are injuries. And when you look at the rest of the Falcons skill group, it's not that impressive. And Kyle Pitts is the one guy that stands out as a unique talent that can really challenge defenses. And unfortunately for the Falcons, they weren't able to maximize that. A lot of that had to do with inconsistency from Kyle Pitts. I think a lot of that had to do with how the Falcons structure their offense and treating a tight end like Kyle Pitts, trying to treat him like a more traditional tight end as opposed to a player that has a unique skill set that you kind of have to make a space for, that he's not just going to be a player that you can drop in as a traditional inline wide tight end and just say, oh, he'll make it work. He's a unique specimen, which is why he was the 4th overall pick. Yeah. And I don't think the Falcons really leaned on that. And I think hopefully they will lean more into that this upcoming season. They don't need Kyle Pitts to go out there and catch 8 passes for 100 yards every single week because they have the big three that they can rely on. But there's going to be, 5, 10 games where they're going to need Kyle Pitts' explosive capabilities, his ability to be a playmaker, and you got to make defenses defend every blade of grass. And the Falcons become infinitely more easy to defend when it's like, okay, well, we only have to worry about Bijan Robinson, so we're just going to stack the box. And if we have 2 competent corners, we should be able to keep Drake London and Darnell Mooney in check. And there's nothing else the Falcons are going to be able to throw at us that's really going to challenge us. And when you're facing quality defenses like Philadelphia and other teams, like, they can do those types of things. And if the Falcons want to break through and be a type of offense that can really challenge some of the best defenses in the NFL, like you hope they can do as a playoff contender, I think having a player like Kyle Pitts with his unique traits is going to be extremely valuable for this team. And it's a hard it's a hard reality for me to buy that the Falcons can make the playoffs without Kyle Pitts being at least a significant contributor, if not the main contributor in their offense.
Oh, I'd absolutely agree. Key on third down. I mean, I think he is going to be a key on third down this coming season, as he should be, as defenses are keying in on Bijan Robinson, like you said, Darnell Mooney as well. You know, that other option, that other weapon in Kyle Pitts, especially on third down, when we know third down has been troublesome for the Falcons offense over the years. So completely agree with you on that for sure. But I wanted to flip this switch over here to the defense here, and we look at this Falcons defense. I know we kind of talked about it at the top in terms of where the front office vision is at this point, Aaron. They've made some moves. I mean, we talk about the Leonard Floyd signing, the 1-year deal. Morgan Fox, he's going to join that D line with some pretty good pass rushing abilities. Got Divine Diablo, linebacker, who signed a 2-year deal. He's a speedy guy who knows how to pursue a ball carrier. The Falcons' total defense, though, last year was ranked 23rd overall. Where do you see this defense really going this coming season? I know we touched on it again a little bit towards the top in terms of the vision, but this particular defensive crew, do you see just some growing pains here, or do you see a defense that really is going to be able to start laying a foundation for the future?
Well, I think certainly you're hoping that they can lay a foundation for the future, as you said, Jeff, earlier. Like they have a lot of young players that they're hoping that will form that foundation. The question is going to be how quickly can they get those guys up to speed to be difference makers for their defense? Obviously, Eagles fans experienced this last year with guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean in the secondary. Obviously, you've had impact players like Jalen Carter. Sorry, confusing. Jalen's at Georgia.
It's all right. I do it too.
Jalen Carter, and you've seen those guys contribute right away. But the Eagles have the privilege of having an already established defense, so they don't need all their rookies to come in right away and impact. They can give those guys a redshirt season. The Falcons do not have that privilege. They need Jalen Walker. They need James Pierce. They need Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman all to kind of carve out potentially starting roles right away. They had invested some day 2 selections on some D linemen last year, and Ruka Roro at D tackle, Brandon Dorless in the 4th round, and Braylon Trice. They got none of those contributions from those guys. They're expecting bigger things from those guys. And so I think to answer your question, how much better can this defense be than they were? It will entirely depend on how quickly the Falcons can get those young players up to speed and become impactful players to start living up to where the Falcons selected them in recent drafts. Just because the veteran presence on the team, you still have 2 very good veterans in the secondary, Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. But in the front 7, it's not, Grady Jarrett is gone. David Onyemata is coming off a down year. Morgan Fox is a solid rotational piece. Leonard Floyd is, nearing the end of his sort of career. And, you wonder how much is left in the tank. It's a similar conversation that the Falcons had last year with Matthew Judon, who they had high expectations for and did not quite live up to that. And because went through that experience with Judon last year, you're wondering, like, are they going to go through that same experience with Leonard Floyd this year? Divine Diablo, very talented, athletic linebacker, but is kind of learning the position, transitioning from safety in college to that linebacker position, and certainly has improved enough to get paid by the Falcons. But are you getting a true difference maker, or are you just kind of getting a solid role player for your defense? And so those are all the questions for the Falcons. There's a lot more questions on the defense than on the offense. And I think so much of it depends on how quickly can James Pierce and Jalen Walker really contribute to this pass rush. How quickly can some of those young pieces in the secondary kind of solidify their spots, and how much gas is left in the tank of some of these veteran players that the Falcons have.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting storyline to follow for sure, where this defense goes, and especially within the division too, because I mean it's going to be an interesting competitive division. At least I believe that it is. So I do want to talk about maybe some of the rumors that the Falcons could potentially look to upgrade their secondary by going after some available talent that's out there, maybe like Jalen Ramsey. Perhaps, they might look at bringing in a center with some experience from an offensive standpoint. Seems like the center position may need to be addressed at some point here. So as we're looking at potentially what else this team and organization can do during this offseason here, Aaron, do you think the Falcons could make another splash this summer before the season starts by some sort of acquisition?
It's definitely a possibility. I think a lot will depend on how training camp goes. Like you saw it last year where the Falcons picked up Justin Simmons, the safety, and
Yeah.
Matthew Judon late in the process, in the middle of August. But a lot of that had to do with they suffered some injuries with Braylon Trice, their rookie third round pick, and their presumptive starting safety in DeMarco Hellams going down, and that prompted the Falcons to make a move. I don't know if without those injuries would the Falcons have been as aggressive, and so that's kind of where I'm at this stage. I think the Falcons are pretty content with their roster as it sits right now,
Okay.
and so if there are injuries, they may make a move. But I think you've identified two areas of concern for the Falcons roster. They lose Drew Dalman in free agency, their
Yep.
starting center for the last couple of years, and now they're replacing him with Ryan Newsel, who's a former undrafted free agent. Newsel did start 8 games last year, and I think 12 games combined over the last 2 seasons due to injuries to Drew Dalman, and was solid in that role. But there's a difference between being a capable fill-in starter when you know that the starter is eventually going to come back, and
Yeah.
versus being the guy for the entire season that the team is hinging their success on. And the Falcons just recently signed Newsel, who was a restricted free agent, to a 2-year contract. So they're showing a lot more confidence in Ryan Newsel than I think many people on the outside who probably have not heard about Ryan Newsel at
Yeah.
all. Like, who is this guy? They're a little bit more confident in him than I think outsiders would be. And so I don't know if the Falcons, if there is a veteran center that becomes available a little bit later in the summer, maybe they look at that guy, especially to shore up depth. But I think the Falcons at this point are pretty confident that Newsel is going to be able to lock down that starting spot. And then when you look at Jalen Ramsey, the reason why you see this connection with Jalen Ramsey is a lot because the relationship he has with Raheem Morris. And I don't know if the Falcons, there was a potential possibility of the Falcons, I think, could have gone after Jalen Ramsey at some point this summer before the draft. But then when they went out and invested in Xavier Watson, Billy Bowman, the
Yeah.
safety, the 4th round pick, is going to be expected to contribute as a nickel corner. And they like his versatility. And I think that's really the selling point at this stage in Jalen Ramsey's career is his ability to play multiple roles. He can play inside, he can play outside, he can potentially play some safety for you. But the issue with Jalen Ramsey is Jalen Ramsey, and this is not a problem, but it's like he wants to win. And the last couple of years he's been on teams that didn't win, he immediately was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And the other flip side of that is he also likes to get paid whenever he goes to a new team.
Right.
And I don't
As
think
all players could. Yes.
again, no reason for Jalen Ramsey, no shaming him. I would be, if I was Jalen Ramsey, I would be the same way. So
Absolutely.
he has that privilege, given how good a player he is, to basically do that. And I don't know if the Falcons are in that position at this stage to be we can go out there and get that quote unquote mercenary that is Jalen Ramsey that's going to push us over the hump. I think they're going to want to see what they have in their young pieces. But certainly I do think if the Jalen Ramsey situation in Miami lingers, as we get closer to the season and in the lead up to the trade deadline, and depending on if that price tag goes down, maybe, and the Falcons are like, hey, this is a great bargain for us, I think that's when they would seriously entertain bringing in someone like Jalen Ramsey. So I do feel like those are two areas where the Falcons can get better at. But I think in the meantime, over the course of the summer, they're not going to be that aggressive at, they're going to play a wait and see game at those two spots.
Gotcha. Yeah. Reminds me of the Philadelphia Eagles a decent amount, when there are players who are available, it's like, wait till training camp, wait to see, what happens if certain teams want to offload certain players too. It's, it's one of the reasons why the Philadelphia Eagles had CJ Gardner-Johnson on the roster for 2 seasons. I'm going to miss him so very much, but another topic for another time. But Aaron, before I let you go here, after talking about the moves that have been made by the Falcons front office, the vision for where this team may be going and heading here in 2025, I'd love for you to give the front office a grade this offseason here. So to close us out here, what grade would you give the Falcons front office for this offseason with the moves that they've made, and why?
I border on like a B minus C plus, depending on what mood I'm in, depending on,
Right.
that's kind of where I'm at, where it feels like if I was just judging it purely off of free agency, I'd probably give him like a C minus. And then if I was looking at the draft, I'd probably give him like a B plus. And the reason why I don't give them higher than that, even though I think they did an incredible job given the limited resources in the draft. Is part of the reason why they had the limited resources is because of decisions made by this front office where,
Right.
they had limited cap space. Why did they have limited cap space? Because they decided to give Kirk Cousins $100 million, and that blew up in their face. Why
Yes.
did they have limited draft picks this year? Is because they decided to trade up in the draft or trade away those draft assets over the past. And they decided to trade away future draft assets this year. So it's hard for me to be too praising of it because it's like you know overly colorful metaphor, but you kind of crapped in the bed and
Yeah.
you got to lie in it, and it's like you crapped in it. Like this wasn't somebody else's crap. Like
Right.
this is your a situation of your own
Yes.
making. So it's one of those things where, like, when I look at the limited, I think they did a really good job given their limited resources, but at the same time you do have to kind of penalize them a little bit for the fact that they had limited resources in the first place.
Yeah,
So
that's
I, I
fair.
do I
Mhm.
do think, when I'm being more optimistic, I tend to be B minus, but sometimes I'm just like, this is just really a C plus offseason for the Atlanta Falcons. But yeah, I'll probably go B minus today.
All right, sounds good. Well, folks, you got to listen to Aaron and the great content that they're putting out over at the Locked On Falcons podcast. You know, we love our Locked On podcast here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show. Again, Aaron Freeman from the Locked On Falcons podcast. Buddy, again, let everybody know where they can find you on the socials out there if they want to follow you.
Yeah. If you want to check me out on Twitter, Locked On Falcons is the place to do it. Blue Sky Falcons fans. And of course, you can find Locked On Falcons 5 days a week, all summer long. We're, everybody else is taking vacations. We're still going to be going strong all the way up to training camp. Locked On
Nice.
Falcons on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, very good. And you can follow us here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show on various social media sites. We are over on Instagram, Twitter/X at Philadelphia PST. You can follow me at Jeffrey_Warren. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that you can follow my co-host Eric as well over on Twitter/X at Brick Pollitt. I'm over on TikTok, Mr. Jeff Warren. Search us out on Facebook, on Threads. Eric and I are both over on Blue Sky as well. Again, Aaron, buddy, it was great talking to you, man. Seriously, I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm hoping maybe we can discuss some more NFL ball at some point down the road, talk about the Falcons more. I'd love to have you back on the show.
Absolutely, Jeff.